The silence of dawn is shattered by the clinking of glasses. Another day begins under the invisible weight of suffering, a heavy energy that seems to fill every corner of the house, every breath, every thought. A young adult awakens with a tense body, muscles clenched before the day even starts. The walls around him are silent witnesses to an invisible war that has raged for years. It is not the bricks or concrete that hold this house together, but the patterns of hurt, resentment, and fear that accumulate like layers of dust on an old bookshelf. His father, a man broken by his own demons, seeks refuge in alcohol. Each empty bottle is a silent scream of unprocessed pain, abandoned dreams, wounds that never healed. When he drinks, his words are like sharp knives, slicing through the self-esteem of everyone around him. They are not just words, but fragments of a wounded soul that never learned another way to express its vulnerability. His mother, in turn, has become a statue of silence. Her eyes, once bright with hope, are now two oceans of contained sorrow. She absorbs every harsh word like a sponge, internalizing the pain, storing each wound in her heart as if they were secrets that cannot be revealed. Her silence is not peace, but a suffocated scream from years of submission. The younger siblings repeat the cycle as if it were a predetermined fate. They have learned that aggression is the only possible language, that love is expressed through shouting, that respect is earned through intimidation. Every argument at home is a play in which everyone plays roles they never chose, but were imposed upon them by generational pain. At work, toxicity finds fertile ground. A superior who turns the professional environment into a battlefield of psychological warfare. His words are projectiles meant to diminish, to make you feel smaller than you truly are. Every criticism is not about performance, but a systematic destruction of self-worth. Friends, once a source of joy and support, have become silent judges. Relationships have turned into competitions where a person's worth is measured by external achievements, by titles, by the number of likes on social media. Constant comparison erodes the possibility of genuine connection, of true friendship. An old Zen tradition says that we do not suffer because of external events, but because of our reaction to them. Our inner world creates our reality long before any external event takes place. And this young man lives trapped in a cycle of pain that seems to have no escape, like a labyrinth with no doors, no windows. The energy around him is toxic, heavy, suffocating. Each breath seems to carry the poison of destructive relationships. He feels like a boat adrift in a sea of negative emotions, without a rudder, without direction, without hope. But something inside him resists. A small fire, almost extinguished, but still alive. A spark of awareness that whispers, there is another way. There is a possibility of transformation. And it is precisely this whisper that will change everything. The first ray of sunlight pierces through the window. A new day begins, and with it, the start of an unexpected journey. The monk appears on the horizon, a promise of change. Daylight slowly advances, filling every corner of the gray landscape. The young man walks almost automatically, unaware that his steps are leading him beyond familiar territory. His feet move as if they have a memory of their own, carrying the weight of years of accumulated suffering. The surrounding mountains seem to watch his journey. Ancient trees, silent witnesses to countless human stories, sway gently as if whispering ancient secrets. The air is different here, cleaner, as if it could pierce through layers of sorrow and grief. A meditation retreat. Words that once would have sounded like a foreign language now draw him in like an intimate calling. It was not a conscious choice, but something that simply happened. As if the universe had conspired to offer him a chance to breathe, a moment of escape from his suffocating reality. His first steps inside the monastery are hesitant. The old wooden walls seem to hold stories of transformation, of souls that arrived broken and left whole. Each creaking step echoes the memory of monks who, for centuries, have sought to understand the mysteries of human existence. And then he sees him, an elderly monk seated in the lotus position, so still he could be mistaken for a statue. But his eyes radiate a peace that seems to challenge the very existence of suffering. There are no immediate words, just a gaze that cuts through layers of pain, penetrating beyond the hardened mask built over years. It is an encounter that transcends verbal communication, something that happens in the realm of silence and deep understanding. The monk finally breaks the silence. His voice is neither a command nor advice. It is like a soft breeze carrying the wisdom of centuries. He begins to tell the story of Siddhartha, the prince who abandoned all comforts to understand the nature of human suffering. Before he became Buddha, the elder says, Siddhartha too faced struggles. Born into a palace of privilege, he discovered that wealth and power did not shield him from suffering. His journey began when he realized that true transformation is born from inner understanding. The words fall like seeds on the barren soil. The young man feels something stir within him. It is not just an intellectual realization, but a visceral recognition of a deeper truth. Toxic people, the monk continues, are like mirrors. They are not the problem. They reveal what remains unresolved within us, our deepest attachments. Every moment of anger, every feeling of victimization is a window into our inner world. The mirror analogy unsettles him. Does this mean that those who hurt him are, in fact, his greatest teachers? That every shout from his father, every silence from his mother, every criticism from his boss is an invitation to self-knowledge? The monk smiles, as if reading his thoughts. A smile filled with compassion, wisdom, and a touch of Zen humor. It is not a smile of condescension, but one of profound recognition of the human journey. The conversation will continue, but for now, only silence speaks. A silence pregnant with possibilities, with transformation, with hope. The young man breathes. For the first time, without the weight of the world on his shoulders. The world around him seemed different, not because anything external had changed, but because his perception had transformed. The monk led him to a small Zen garden, where stones and sand formed ancestral patterns of deep meaning. I will teach you a practice called Tonglen, said the elder, a breathing technique that goes beyond simple meditation. Here, you don't run from pain, you transform it. Breathing, once a mechanical act, became a tool for healing. Inhaling suffering, not as something to be feared, but as energy to be transmuted. Exhaling compassion, not as an abstract concept, but as a real and tangible force. The young man closed his eyes. First inhale. He drew in all the anger of his alcoholic father. He felt the weight of resentment, the frustration, the unprocessed pain that turned him into a destructive being. He did not judge, he simply observed. First exhale, he released understanding, healing, love. Another inhale, he absorbed his mother's suffocated silence. Every unshed tear, every stifled scream. He felt the weight of submission, of the fear of expressing herself. He exhaled freedom, strength, the possibility of transformation. The monk observed in silence. His presence was like a lighthouse guiding without interfering, illuminating without blinding. A Zen parable seemed to rise into the air, carried by the soft mountain breeze. The story of a samurai who encountered a master swordsman in a remote temple. When he provoked a fight, expecting to prove his strength, the master remained absolutely serene. Compassion does not mean weakness, the elder explained. It means having the courage to see beyond the mask of aggression, to see the wounded human being behind every destructive action. The young man realized that having compassion did not mean agreeing with or accepting toxic behavior. It meant recognizing the humanity in others, even when that humanity was deeply wounded, and manifested itself through aggression. The practice continued. He inhaled his boss's criticism, the competitiveness of his friends. Each inhale was an act of courage. Each exhale, an act of healing. Not for others, but first and foremost for himself. Imagine each breath as an alchemist, the monk said. You transform poison into medicine, pain into understanding, anger into compassion. Tears began to fall, not of sadness, but of deep recognition. Each tear carried years of unprocessed pain, years of resistance, years of mere survival. The Zen garden around him seemed to breathe with him. The stones, the grains of sand, the distant trees, everything pulsed in a dance of understanding and healing. Radical compassion, the monk whispered, is not an external act of kindness. It is an internal commitment to see reality as it is without filters, without defenses. The young man understood that his journey of healing would not be linear. There would be difficult days, moments of relapse, but now he had a tool, a practice, a path. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. A whole day of transformation was coming to an end. But the journey had only just begun. The wind gently swayed the temple bells. An ancient melody echoed through the mountains, announcing the arrival of a new understanding. Night descends upon the monastery like a cloak of profound silence. The young man remained seated, his body no longer carrying the same rigidity as before. The monk approaches, his steps almost imperceptible on the ancient wooden floor. Let's talk about detachment, says the elder. His words are not a command, but an invitation to an inner journey. The 5 hindrances are revealed like chapters of an intimate book on human existence. First, anger. This energy that corrodes from within, consuming without leaving visible traces. A flame that burns not its object, but the one who carries it. Greed arises as a second ghost. Not just the thirst for material possessions, but the insatiable desire to be recognized, validated, admired. Every achievement quickly becomes just another rung on an endless ladder. Laziness, not merely physical rest, but mental inertia. The fear of facing one's own demons, of looking inward with brutal honesty. It is easier to blame others, to remain in the role of the victim. Doubt appears as a veil that obscures clarity. Doubt about oneself, about one's abilities, about the possibility of change. A constant whisper that erodes confidence before any action is even taken. Mental restlessness, a whirlwind of thoughts that allows no moment of stillness. Every memory, every fear, every expectation dancing in a frantic waltz, preventing any true peace. The monk then tells the story of Milarepa, a man who began his journey as a vengeful sorcerer, responsible for dozens of deaths. His transformation was not instant, but a process of decades of self-discovery and spiritual practice. Change is not a destination, says the elder. It is a path made with each breath, each conscious choice. He illustrates with a Zen metaphor. Imagine your mind as a river. Thoughts are the waters. You cannot stop thoughts from coming, just as you cannot prevent leaves from falling into a river. But you can choose how you observe them. The young man begins to understand that detachment does not mean not caring. It means not being imprisoned, not being held hostage by every emotion, every memory, every story his mind tells. A practice is taught. Observing thoughts like clouds passing in the sky, not trying to grasp them, not trying to push them away, simply observing, letting them pass. Your father is not just your father, says the monk. Your mother is not just your mother. They are human beings carrying their own stories of pain, just like you. Understanding arrives not as a dramatic moment, but as a gentle dissolution. The rigid edges of his victim identity begin to soften, not through force, but through a nearly imperceptible compassion. The world around him seems to breathe differently. The mountains, the nocturnal sounds, the very silence itself take on a new texture, a texture of freedom. Freedom, the monk whispers, is not about changing the world. It is about changing your relationship with the world. The night deepens, but something within the young man is no longer the same. A seed of transformation has been planted, and seeds, when nurtured with attention, can grow into forests. The first ray of morning light finds the young man different. The rigidity in his shoulders is gone. The constant tension that once shaped him like an invisible armor has dissolved. The monk observes in silence, like a gardener watching a plant slowly bloom. Communication is not just speaking, the elder begins. It is the art of truly connecting, of crossing the barriers we build around ourselves. He introduces a Zen concept of deep listening, not the superficial kind, where one merely waits for a chance to respond, but a listening that penetrates beyond words. A listening that understands the spaces between sentences, the silences heavy with meaning. The young man learns that every word carries a story. His father's aggression is not just anger, but an unprocessed cry of pain. His mother's silence is not weakness, but a survival strategy. His boss's criticism reveals more about his own insecurities than about actual performance. A technique is taught, breathing before responding, not as a trick, but as a ritual of transformation. Each breath acts as a filter, allowing automatic reactions to dissolve, making space for a conscious response. Imagine your words as a river, says the monk, neither completely dammed nor allowed to run wild. A river that flows with awareness, that moves around stones, that adapts to the terrain. Practical exercises follow. Communicating not to wound, not to defend, but to understand. Using words that connect, not divide. Words that build bridges, not walls. Nonviolent communication emerges as a compass expressing needs without judgment, observing without condemning, asking without demanding. Every dialogue transforms into a delicate dance of mutual understanding. The monk shares stories of Zen masters who resolved conflicts not through arguments, but through compassionate silence. Stories where inaction held more power than direct confrontation. To communicate is an act of courage, he explains. It means being vulnerable. It means being willing to be seen in your true essence, without masks, without defenses. He learns that conflict does not have to mean war. It can be a space for growth, for mutual understanding. Each argument, a potential space for transformation. Breathing techniques are integrated into communication. Breathing before reacting, breathing while listening, breathing to stay present. The breath as an anchor of awareness. The young man begins to visualize his future conversations not as battlefields, but as meetings of souls. Each dialogue an opportunity for growth. Each word an instrument of healing. Your family does not need to change for you to find peace, says the monk. You need to change the way you relate to them, the way you see, the way you listen. Words take on a new dimension. No longer projectiles thrown to wound, but bridges carefully built. Each sentence, each poem, each pause carries the possibility of true connection. The sun reaches its highest point. The surrounding mountains seem to whisper the secrets of this silent transformation. Compassionate communication is not a destination, but a path. A path forged in every encounter, in every dialogue, in every conscious breath. The last day at the monastery arrives like a whisper. No drama, no grand farewells. Just a deep understanding that the true journey is only beginning. The monk looks into the young man's eyes. No longer as master and student, but as two human beings recognizing the same essence. Transformation, he says, is not a destination. It is a continuous process. He then gathers the teachings like a gardener harvesting the fruits of a carefully cultivated field. Each lesson is not an endpoint, but an opening. Each technique, a doorway to new discoveries. You will not change your family overnight, the elder explains. You will not transform your workplace with the snap of a finger, but you can transform your relationship with all of it. And that is the true revolution. The afternoon light begins to paint the monastery in golden tones. The young man now understands that his journey was never about finding a magical solution to toxic people. It was about finding inner peace, regardless of what happens around him. The monk recites an ancient verse: "You yourself must make the effort." The Buddhas only show the way. The words fall like seeds, not to be memorized, but to be lived. Every breath, every moment of awareness, every compassionate choice becomes an act of transformation. As he descends the mountain, the young man is no longer the same. Not because he has changed outwardly, but because his inner landscape has been reshaped. Toxic people will still exist, but he will no longer be their prisoner. The final message crystallizes with clarity. True freedom is not in changing others, but in transforming the way we react, the way we see, the way we exist. 3 fundamental principles will accompany him. First, every pain is an invitation to self-knowledge. There are no villains, only wounded human beings trying to survive. Second, compassion does not mean agreeing with or allowing destructive behavior. It is having the courage to see the humanity behind the mask of aggression. Third, change is a process, not an arrival, but a continuous journey. Every conscious breath, every compassionate choice, every moment of non-reactivity is a step along this path. The monastery fades into the distance. The mountain remains, a silent witness, and the young man descends not as a warrior who has conquered, but as a human being who is understood. External toxicity does not define who we are. Our inner response does, and that is the deepest freedom of all.